Okay, I guess we'll get started here. So thanks for joining. This is our third live session we do in the editor, and there will also be a couple more. And the reason we do them on one hand is, of course, we want to show what we've built over the last time. I believe, Mark, Cassandra, you're familiar with our old editor, the current one that we have today. And we've built the new one to basically recreate the user experience in the editor. We've learned a lot from our old editor over the last couple of years. And we've also learned that there were some things that were really not easy. And in the new editor, we tried to improve that and make it a little bit easier to use. And in the end, for us, it was biggest point of feedback we got was it needs to be easy to also be efficient to use it. We know that many of our publishers are coming from print, and going away from InDesign to another tool means you can only do that if it does save you time in the end. And beyond saving you time, obviously, we also want to leverage all the capabilities and possibilities we have on mobile devices. That's always been kind of the key cornerstone of our editor. So this session, on one hand, for us to show it, but also really important for us to learn from our users, from you, how it works, what we can improve, how we can make it better. And with that, just a real quick check. Do let me know if the screen is visible, if the audio is coming through okay. And throughout this session, if you have any questions, we're not that many people on this call. Do interrupt me and feel free to steer the live session towards what you would like to see, what you would like to learn as well. So I assume video and audio is coming through, otherwise do interrupt me. We will be recording this session. I hope this is okay. We have a couple of users who can't make it at this time. So we'll be sending them a recording of the video as well. And without further ado, I will just jump into the editor. I will disable my video. So this was my chance to say hi in person. Just because we are here based in Bali, Indonesia, and sometimes the bandwidth is a little bit of a limited resource. So I should be presenting. I'm going to jump into the portal, and I assume this is familiar to you. For anyone listening in and hasn't used the portal, then this is our publication management system. And there's many things I could show, but this is for different sessions. Today, we want to jump into the issues section. And I have created a new issue using our Type-of-2 editor. And I will jump into the editor and start explaining a little bit what this is all about. So given that I think most of the users that will be watching it and that are currently live have already seen the old editor, so I won't go into too much detail, but the overall layout, just to explain really quick, we have a bar on the top, which allows me to edit content on the page. That is usually, if you've used Word before or Google Docs, those should be quite familiar. You can hover over to see some tooltips that explain what exactly you can do with these controls. This is mainly about text. In the center up here, we can switch between the different device types. We got phone, portrait, landscape, as well as tablet. And we've got full screen, which is the desktop computer. It could be a TV screen, all of those. And here, I think maybe is the first little introduction into the idea of our editor, also what makes it very different to PDF content. Everything that we build here in this editor is responsive, which means that you create it once. If we look at this layout here, we have a header section, a title with subtitles on the top, and an image at the bottom. And on a tablet view, you can see how it uses the size of the screen optimally. And if I switch to a phone, it will still be readable. The text won't shrink down, which is what you usually have in a PDF. The image will adjust to the sides, and that works on all different devices. That's on the top bar. On the top right, you can leave the editor. There is a outline mode, which will show you a little bit more where these widgets are. There's full screen if you want a distraction-free space. You can save the page as soon as we make any changes. And that's everything we have in the top bar. Very similar as well to our old editor. That's not where we've changed a lot. And on the left-hand side, we have pages. For now, I've just created a cover page. We'll create a couple more later on. We have blocks, which are saved elements. Those are really, the idea is you don't want to spend time dragging small little atom-like elements on the page. You want to spend time, reusing the layouts you've done before and dragging in content that works and is already laid out. The next one here are the widgets. Those are the smallest building blocks of our editor. We'll go through them in more detail as well. The next one is attributes, which allows me to change individual properties of some of these widgets. And as we'll see today, quite exciting. This is the very first time that we demonstrate our effects panel. We'll get to that in a little bit as well. And finally, we have the media library. This is where you can manage, upload, edit, and use images, audio, videos to work with the page. Whoever worked with the old editor will notice a bit of a difference. We promoted this one to be more space, to have some more space. It's easier to manage the different images. You can group them in collections. You can import images from other sources like Unsplash, later on also Google Drive, Dropbox. So that was just kind of running through the overall layout. This will never change. This will always be the same. This is something that hopefully is easy to get familiar with. But now, after that quick introduction, I want to really just touch on all the things that have changed and that are new, going from what we learned from the old editor to be broken or difficult, and how we tried to improve that. So I'll start out by creating a new blank page. So we're in full control of what's happening on this page. So a blank page means there's no widgets here. We can use this as a canvas to create the page as we want it. And you can see that right now the page is selected. This happens, there's no other widget. This will be here on the spot. Just make sure. Okay, we've got someone new joining. Hello. We just went through a short little introduction on the editor. Basically, we're just starting on a blank page now, and I'm gonna show how we can build a page from here. So what I'm gonna do first, before we go about the blocks where it's already created content, I just go ahead and drag in a heading onto the page. So if we want to add elements to a page, we go on the left into the widgets section, and from there I'm going to use the heading, and I can drag this one. So while I hold my mouse down, I can move it around onto the page. And what we see whenever we work with these widgets and drag them, we have this blue line that will always appear at all the spaces where I'm able to place a widget. And you can notice, even though regardless where I move it right now, it will only show the line at the very top. And this is something that might be unfamiliar if you're coming from tools like InDesign. But for the web and for responsive content, this is a very important way of structure. So after dropping the heading here, you can see that it snaps to the top of the page. Now, working with a layout, it usually, if you have a heading or text that goes all the way to the left, it's usually not a best practice. You want to give it some spacing. And this is one of the bigger learnings from the old editor. We used to have, selecting the heading widget, on the left-hand side, there was an option to add a margin to the left, a margin to the right, and all the different sides. That was even encapsulated in the layer widget. It was very complicated. One of the bigger things that changed here is on each of the sides of a widget. If you move all the way to the left, you can see there's a small little hand cursor now. This allows me to grab this edge and drag it inwards. So by doing that, I can basically give space to any of the widgets that I'm using. And right now, I'm just dragging it. I can also, if I want to, I can hold the Shift key down. By doing that, it will drag both the left and right side. This is useful it's typically useful if you want to have symmetric spacings to the left and right. And in our case, what I want to do is I'm going to hold the Command key down, or this is the Control key on Windows, and then it will add the same padding to all 4 different sides. And by doing that, I'm going to make this, I want to maybe first create a top header element, which is here, and now I'm going to add a paragraph underneath. Here, text. So I'm dragging the text widget, and now you can see most of the page. It will show me the drop line underneath the heading widget because it will snap right underneath it. I will have options to also place it above, to the left, and to the right. But for now, I'm just going to place it underneath, and I'm going to copy this a couple times just to make sure we have some content in here. And same as before, I do want to make sure there's a little bit of spacing. So again, I'm going to adjust the sides by dragging the edges of the text widget to apply some space to this page. And I did it now one by one. I can also use the Command key or the Control key again to apply it evenly to all sides. You will notice that if you drag like this, there's basically a small little grid. So it's not, by default, you're not able to drag it pixel per pixel. That was also one of the learnings where previously customers, it was really difficult to make sure it's the same spacing for the paragraph widget as it is for the heading widget. Now we basically, with every step, we move it by 8 pixels, and this can be changed also in the settings. But this makes it easier to make sure that here's basically the same baseline to the left where they start. Now we have 2 widgets here, and as a next step, I want to show you how to change some of these widgets. Again, based on a learning from our old editor, we've simplified this process a little bit. So I'm going to select the heading widget, and I'm going to look at the left-hand side. We have a background color property attribute. So if I click anywhere on this one, we have a redesigned color picker coming up, where you're able to just click and drag the color you want. You can also use hex colors, but we also have some material design colors, or it's a specific color palette that usually works well in mobile. And I'll give this a blue color. Now the background.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Can you save your color palette in that widget, or do you have to submit the color every time?
That's an excellent question. So right now, those colors are preset by us, but we have a feature in our backlog where we allow you to, so what it does, it remembers the last colors that you used, but you'll also be able to click save colors that you've used before for later use. So thanks a lot for the question, and those questions are exactly what we need to make sure, are we working on the correct features, and which features should we prioritize? I assume this would be a helpful addition for you.
Yeah, I mean, because we have brand colors that we use in every issue. So right now it's a lot of copying and pasting that number over and over again.
Right. Yeah, no, that's excellent. So we have also from our team, me, Toby, we also have Chris and Ali on board. And Chris, can you take a note of this one? Excellent. Okay, cool. Yeah, so that will be coming. Next, now the contrast is a little bit weak. The heading is black and the background is blue. So I want to change the heading's text color. There's been a little bit of changes how that works. In the old editor, you had to select the text, and then there was a toolbar coming up, which had the negative downside that I have to select all of it to be able to change the text. Now, this is a little bit easier. If I want to change the text color of the heading widget, I can just click on it once anywhere. And on the top left is our font color control, which will again open our color picker. I set this one to white, and we're done. If I want to change only a specific word, call this one first issue. I only change the word issue, then I just select the text that I want to change, and then I could fine tune this one to maybe a less. There we go. So what we have here is basically, it's only one widget. It's the heading widget. In the old editor, if I want to create a background color with a text on top, I would always need to use the second widget, which is the infamous container widget, layer widget, we used to call it. We still have it for some use cases, but I think you'll find that it's not needed as much anymore. Okay, so I also want to make sure I give you some room for questions. If there's anything, feel free to jump in. Otherwise, I'll go to the next new addition or change I want to show here, which is columns. So one thing that has changed in the new editor is there's no more columns widget, which doesn't mean that we don't have it. We just really tried to figure out how can we simplify this. So if, let's say for this example, I have my heading up here. Now I want to have text in 2 columns. What I can do now is I can first clone this widget or create a new paragraph. To clone a widget, I can simply use this control, the first one in here, clone widget. I click on it and it's placed underneath. And I can click it 2 more times. So we have 4 paragraphs underneath now. And I'm going to take the second paragraph here. And on the top left, with the blue label, this is where I can drag an existing widget if I want to move it to another place. So by doing that, I'm going to move it. And I'm going to go a bit slow. You can see this thick blue line shows me where it's going to be dropped. I could use that to place it at a different location of the page. I'm going to move this one to the right of our paragraph on the top. And if I release it here, you can see that it simply jumps into paragraphs, into columns, left to right. And I'll do the same for this one down here. Yeah. So no more need to drag in a columns widget. In the past, it was necessary to drag it in. Then you have to set up how many columns you want. Now in the new editor, this is hopefully a little bit easier. And what I just did now for the paragraph widget, in fact, works with any of the widgets that we have. This could be a button widget that I drag to the right, or images, of course, sliders, panorama images, Facebook boxes. So anything that's in the widgets, we're able to drag to the left and right as well. And back to our responsive philosophy, you can imagine that on a tablet, this might still work pretty well. If I go to a phone screen, this would be too small if we squeeze them in one row. So by default, any columns going to the phone screen will collapse into a single column again. This is something that we can change. There are some cases, if you, for example, want to have a bar with social media icons, then you might want to keep them in the same line. They often don't, there's not a lot of text in there, maybe just the. So for that, there is a way to do that by selecting the columns widget. And now here's one thing that might need a tiny little bit of getting used to. So I'll go back and select the heading widget for now. And you can see if I hover over these 2 paragraphs, it shows me a slight blue outline what widget I'm on now. So if I click this once, you can see that indeed we still have a columns widget. It's just a different way for creating it. So the first click will select the columns widget, and now I can click again to select the text widget. If I'm down in the text widget and I want to go up into the columns widget, we can also use the bottom bar, which will now always show me where am I in my what we call widget hierarchy, which just means how are they nested. The text widget is selected, the columns widget is above, so I can click this one, and I'm out here on the columns widget. And on the left-hand side, collapse columns is a similar setting we had in our old editor. I can change this to never. Collapse columns here really means on the phone, it should be a single column. Never means it should never collapse. It should always stay in multiple columns. And lastly, I'm going to drag one of the graphs on the just to illustrate. This is not only for 2 columns, this also works for 3. I could place this in the middle or to the right, and we have 3 columns. Okay, maybe next. So I also want to be a little bit practical about what we're doing here. So if this was an article I want to publish in an issue, let's give this one a header image. So on the left-hand side, we have our media library. When you open this the first time, it's going to be empty. We don't currently automatically bring over the old editor's images. It's already something that we've received as feedback, which we'll have a look at. But for now, what you can do, it's a little bit easier to bring in content. You can open up, I'm going to do that now. I have some stock images stored. I think most of them are already in there. So I can select multiple, either in Windows Explorer or in Finder if you're on Mac, and you can simply drag them here onto the page. If I do that, you can see that it's uploaded right away. This works for images, this works for audio and for video. And from there, I'm going to place this image on the page. And the way that this works is, again, similar to how widgets work. I will drag this one, and I get my blue bar telling me where it's going to be. And maybe here, I'm going to go a little bit slower on dragging, because with a layout that has columns, you can see that right now, the blue column shows up above the right-hand paragraph, which means it will be placed on the right-hand side. But instead, I want to make sure it's underneath the top, the blue heading. So I'm going to move it up a little bit. And it's maybe a bit of an unfortunate color, so we can't really see the blue outline too good, but it's right there at the bottom. So if I release it here, we have our image placed on this page. Now, let me save this one, just to make sure we're not using any changes here. This is maybe not the most creative first article, but it hopefully shows some of the basic tools. For the image widget, not a lot has changed. Usually what you notice in the new editor is that there are less attributes to choose from, but most of the time they're still the same. You can still do the same amount of things. Again, this was because we moved our paddings of the image to be draggable, and we moved links and other things to the top bar. But what's still left here is maybe an interesting one. Parallax is a little bit easier to use now. So if I enable parallax on this image, then we can see while I scroll down the page, the image has a subtle move effect along with my scrolling of the page or swiping on a mobile device. I'll go back to mobile, you should see that even a little bit more. This is how you give a subtle interactive feature to a page. We do like this one a lot because it's not overwhelming. There are some much stronger effects that you can create, but if you have a more calm magazine or you want to focus more on the content, then those we usually recommend using them, because people will be aware that they're not reading a PDF. It usually works. There's just something going on the page that's usually quite enjoyable. So a subtle effect that we quite like here. So much for the image widget. We already received some feedback on this one. There will be a static version of the parallax effect, which will mean that while I scroll down, the background image will stay exactly where it is. It will basically not move similar to if it was here at the background. Right now, it moves slightly relative to my movement of the page. So we'll have some more options in terms of how fast this one will move. And maybe from the image widget, let's also place a video here, maybe as an alternative. This one here, Playground MP4, you can always filter by video only as well. And same as with the image, I drag this one and release it where I want it to be placed. I'm going to place this one underneath the image. And I'm going to delete the image from before. Now, the video does ask you to choose an image source, a poster source as well. Otherwise, it would show white. Let me just do that real quick here. And autoplay. Yeah, that's the thing. So autoplay should be turned on, then it will play instantly. We can set this one to loop as well and hide the controls. So this is if you want to create more like a background video, background animation that is playing. And I'm gonna save this page again. So maybe another breakpoint here, if there are any questions, or also if you want, if there are any of the widgets or features that you would want to learn about. I just want to give you a brief chance to voice that.
I had a question about the images. Can we still link them with a URL?
Yeah, excellent question.
I didn't see it.
Yeah, so I'm gonna drag in the image from before again, and I'm gonna move the video for now. So if you want to link an image, all you need to do is you click on the image widget, and now you can see most text controls are disabled, but the last one here, this is our hyperlink. This is what we can use to create a link either to another page or navigating to a different page in the same issue. And the last four are special commands that you can use in the mobile apps or web app. Opening the rating, opening the subscription dialog, closing an issue, and opening the social share dialog. So for now, I'm just gonna jump to we're on the blank page. I'm gonna jump to the cover page, this one. And that's how you create a link. You'll also see if you select the image widget again, the link is highlighted here. You can click to remove the hyperlink here, but you'll see that it's there. You can click it again if you wanna change it. Does that make sense?
Yep, thank you.
This is also the same control, and maybe this is a good time to have a little quick look at how text works. So as I mentioned before, you can select the text widget. If you don't select a range, if you don't select the word, if you just click inside, then anything you do here will affect the full text widget. So let's change the font color here to a dark gray. I make it just for showing bold, big, underline. I can turn on and off. The font size now we can toggle up and down here as well. You can also type in a specific value. We do have text alignment up here as well now. It used to be on the left in the attributes, which was just not really consistent. Now we made sure that everything text related comes up here. I can change the line height. Right now we have single, normal, 1.5, and double, which are regular, I think the ones from Microsoft Word. But we will also have a custom option here if you want to fine tune this. And we have bullet points and so ordered and unordered lists with bullets and with numbers. And this hyperlink, the same one we were using for the image, we can also use for the text widget. So either, again, I can either select the full one to link everything, but typically for text, let's say here's a link to a document, works exactly the same way. We could send this one to Google. And we can see with an underline that this is a hyperlink. If I want to delete the hyperlink, I just select this one again. And we can clear this one out again. Okay, maybe next. So just quite often, if you have a certain layout or structure of your page, let's say even though I might be able to do a better job, but let's say this is what I want to use for my magazine, and I might have variations for it, but this would be one of the templates that I would want to reuse in my issue. So something that we are able to do now is we can create this whole page. We can save this one as a template for later use. Let me just undo the color here. The way that this works is, and there are basically two ways to create these library blocks. What we need to do is we need to go all the way out to the page widget. You can either click on the bottom left to select it. You can also always click outside of the canvas. It will select the page here. Now, on the top, there is this little box. It doesn't show a tooltip here because it's too far up, but this one says Save as Block. What this one does is, if I click this one, I can give it a name. Let's call this one my article template. Description. I need it now, save selection. And it will inform me a block was created. And we can now go to the pages section, create a new page, and the thumbnail will be showing up in a little bit as well. And select it, article template, create page. And here's our copy of that page now. So we can use that to create more of the same content in the future. So a good example is after creating a new page, this is now, I'm going to change this one to article number 1. First article. We can change the image. I can also maybe use this as an opportunity to show one more of our widgets. Let's take the slider widget here. Again, I need to nudge it to the right space by moving my mouse. Maybe this time I want the slider down here. And by default, it's empty. What you need to do is you can go to Slides, click to Edit. And right now, what you would do now is you can click 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and they would then end up in a slider. But this being a beta version, we just noticed before this call that this is currently not working. So right now I need to drag this one, and I can place it here in the slider. So this is something that will be easier. We're going to fix this one this week as well. So here's my first image. A slider with one image doesn't really do any good, so I'm going to use a second one. Same as before, I'm going to drag this one into the slider image. And now we have a slider with 2 elements. So in the editor, I can click on the left and right icons, the arrows. On the mobile device, I can then also swipe through them left and right to navigate through these sliders. Yeah, and also inside the slider, we can enable the parallax effect. Do that on both of the images. And we can also set the slider to autoplay. This would, I think it doesn't do it in the editor, but if we're in the mobile app or the web app, then this would automatically rotate through after, I think, 3 or 5 seconds. So now you can see we're in a slider that has a parallax effect and also switch through these slides. Has anyone used the parallax effect in the current, in the Typecraft 1 editor?
I mean, I've tried, but I couldn't get it to really work.
Yes. Okay. No, I'm happy to hear that. No, that was a huge technical challenge we had in making parallax work, not only in the editor, so we can set it up, but also on the mobile devices. With all the different versions there are, it took us quite a while to find a good, solid approach how we can get parallax to work on iOS. So that is now working as well. So again, it's something where it's really just a toggle now. We try to make it a bit easier. I hope this will be useful. And again, if you do experience any issues with it, any questions later on, feel free to reach out to us. It's the feedback that we heavily depend on. Okay. Next, what I just did before with the page, I saved the whole page as a template, which might be okay. You can create 10, 15 articles and use them again in the next issue. But there's a different approach, which if you've used tools like MailChimp and similar builders, there's an interesting way if you want to basically save a specific section of your page for later reuse. So let's say I want to have this heading here. It's quite simple. It's really just one widget, but I gave it whatever properties and colors. I can create an exact copy of that widget, of that heading, again using the same icon. It's this little basket icon with the arrow down. And now it's the same. It's very similar to how we saved the whole page, but because it's not the page widget, this is not going to go into the page templates. Instead, this is my blue heading. Instead, this block will now show up in the blocks section, blue heading. We'll also get a thumbnail after a little while. So now I could use that to drag it into the page, maybe above our slider, to maybe use this one as section headings in the article further down. And I just did that for an individual heading. I could also do that for widgets that contain other widgets, like the columns widget. Or let's make this just one step. One of the use cases where the layer widget still comes in handy, I'm going to drag this layer widget onto underneath this first article. Now, this layer doesn't really show anything. It's just meant to be like a container, a collection of other widgets. It does have some properties, though. I'll give this one a background color. Just it helps a little bit in designing it. And next, I'm gonna drag my columns widget inside. So I click once on this block, get the columns widget, and you can see the blue line. It will show it inside the layer widget if you move it around. So movement, we made it, I think, a little bit better than in the old editor, but it still requires you to kind of hold it a little bit longer and release certain where it should be. So layout, nothing's changed, but in the bottom we can see that now that is inside a columns widget, and the columns widget is inside the layer widget. So before I save this one as a block, I want to add a heading above, and now you can see the page has actually moved a little bit. This is to make space, to make it a bit easier to place content. And I'm going to move very slowly now, my mouse cursor up and down. At the very top, this would place it underneath the blue heading, first article. A little bit down, it would place it inside the layer widget. And visually, it wouldn't change anything. And maybe I just demonstrate that real quick. If I release it under the first article, we can always explore this. If I now click on the heading, you can see it's directly underneath the page widget. But if I instead drag the heading into this second step inside that green box, now you can see that this heading is now inside the layer and inside the page. By doing that, I'm going to give some spacing to the heading. And I want to select the top level layer. I could add additional spacing there. I can bring them together. But the reason why I did that was everything that I put inside this heading would then make sense to save as one of these blocks. Now I can save this block as a heading with columns. And again, this will appear in my blocks collection, and I can now drag this heading down. And you can do that on any page. Dragging it all the way down, so we have this new block right here. Okay, I think this really was more about showing the differences. There was not yet a lot of new features that I've shown you, but more differences in how we want to use it. And we really want to learn if this does help you speed up the way and you work with the editor, and if it makes it easier. So again, feel free to shoot any questions my way. Otherwise, I'd like to jump more to the new features. What's really different in the new editor? And I start out with a old familiar friend, again, the layer widget. So we did give it some new spice, some new possibilities now, some actual reason why this widget is still relevant. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag a heading to the very top of my page and release it there, blank space. And again, it's not a lot of attributes we have here, but they are quite interesting. The first one is full height. This up. So let me also give it a background color for now, so we see that which it is. What full height means is, depending on the device that users are on, this will take up exactly one full view. And this was requested quite often, and for anyone who knows how to do that in the old editor, it's really a mess. You have to go into the attributes and use some very complicated formulas to get this in place. Now it's a single toggle on the layer widget to enable full height. And we're going to set a background image. Let's take one of our beach images. Apologies, this is currently not being set, so we'll skip over that. So what you do is, if you want to set a background image, you open the media library and you simply click on the image that you want to use. But right now, again, apologies for any of the bugs. This is still quite early for us. Then if you click on it, this will be applied as a background image to the container. The second thing that comes with this one, which I like a lot for creating what we call hero banners, I'm going to drag in a heading, which will be the title of my article. Second article. So maybe some of you have previously tried some of the use cases for example, want this heading to be centered. What you can already do today is you can center it horizontally using left-right alignment, center alignment. But centering something vertically was not really easy. There was a way, and we could, you take the layer, the old approach was you would drag the padding, which then works on tablet but not on phone. So we tried to find a better way of doing that. And the way we do this now is using our layer widget and using one additional property, which we might be renaming in the future to make it more clear. What we call it here is flex. And if I turn this one on, you can see there are two new attributes popping up, the horizontal alignment and vertical alignment. And if I now click on the heading, we can see it really gets centered on the page. If I go back to the layer, I can choose horizontal, can align it to left and right still. I could also use this to place something at the bottom. This could be if you want to create a text like scroll to read more, for example. Those are usually good to have at the bottom of the page. For now, we'll call this a heading. And we'll give it some padding. All sides. I will move this one back to the center. And I'll give it a background color. So with a background image and parallax enabled, those sections usually shine through quite well. I will quickly create a new page because I do know we had this in the last live session. There we go. So this is exactly the same layer widget with the flex option enabled, along with now a background image that we can set to cover and enable parallax. So now if we scroll, we can see we get a shading, a parallax effect while going through these full page slides. And again, as always, this works on mobile. And this will also work on landscape, where it was really impossible to get this set up in the old editor. So also on landscape, where it's much broader, much more width than it has in height, it's still possible to create these sections that are covering the full page. So that was the flex option, and there was I think 2 users before asked us, what is flex, what does it do? So if you come in and you you might not recall the name, do know that we are working currently on some user tutorials inside the editor, so we can explain these features a little bit better for anyone. Good. Next feature I wanted to show you, and this is where I'm probably a little bit nervous because we literally deployed this one yesterday night. But we've worked on it for quite a while now, and we're quite happy with the result of it. So fingers crossed everything goes well. I want to show to you our effects panel. Anyone who's used Untitled one before has maybe noticed that we had an effects panel that said coming soon for the last 3 years, but now it's finally here. So the way that it works, we use it to basically show fade animations, rotations, opacity, fade-ins, fade-outs on different elements. Again, we're down to the widgets. So what I want to do now is I select the heading, and when the page loads, I want to make this one appear or move a little bit. So with the selected widget, I go to the left, and every widget that we have now has this effects panel here. And I add an effect, and we can see that it just jumped around already. And it says move for 0.6 seconds, and it has this eye icon, which means this effect will always run when the widget starts appearing, becoming visible on the page. And I show that in context in a little bit. If I click on this effect, now we can see the different options we have here. And for now, I'm going to disable the move effect that we saw. When you press the play icon, you can see what happens here. I'm going to disable this one just so we have a clean slate. It does nothing for 0.6 seconds. So let's start out saying this should fade in. It should fade from 0 to 1, basically meaning from invisible to fully visible. And it's going to go for 0.6 seconds, and there's no delay. I show the delay in context in a little bit as well. If I now click the play button, we can see how this fades in. Let's make this a little bit longer. And with each of these effects, you can stagger them. You don't have to choose a single one, like now fade. I could combine that with the flip effect. So flip, I can choose direction, horizontal, that's fine. 180 degrees, that's fine. So if we play this one, we can see that this now, whenever it appears, it will rotate by 180 degrees. Let's try dragging this to 360 degrees. Then we get a full circle animation. So maybe with that, let me jump back to this widget becomes visible. This is what we call a trigger. For now, this is the only trigger available, but very, very soon we'll have triggers, for example, on click. So you'll be able to change this one so that whenever a user clicks on it or taps on it on a phone, it will perform this action. It will perform the rotation or effect. So widget becomes available happens when I open the page in the editor. But in addition to that, it will also happen if I scroll it into view. So I'm going to slowly swipe up now. And as soon as the element becomes available, it starts the effect again. This is to make sure if you have an animation at the bottom of the page, it shouldn't start when the reader opens the page because he wouldn't at all see it. So this will always appear when it comes in. And I'm not sure how quickly my screen sharing is updating, so it might not be as visible to you. Maybe I actually forgot to say in the beginning, we'll give you access, so everyone who's on this call and who doesn't already have access to the new editor, we will invite you to the prayer. Also, anyone who is watching this video later, feel free to reach out to us and we can enable this editor for you and you can start using it. Good. Now, that was one of the effects. I basically covered, I think, the duration, how long is the effect runs. Now, there's also a delay, which sometimes might be, yeah, you need a good use case for this one. So I do want to show you an example where we have such a use case. And for that, I'm going to go back to the cover page where we can try this out real quick. I'll first create a layer at the very bottom of the page and make it full height.
So when you use these, does it add a lot of like weight to your file for when the user downloads it? You know?
Yeah, so there are two things. One is the file size, which is barely impacted. So each of these effects is really only telling, it only contains the information about what it should do. So it's not that it creates a video of it and plays it, which would add a lot to the file size, but this is written in code. So it's literally, I think, for example, if you have an issue with 40 megabytes and you would add an effect to every widget in your issue, it would probably still be 45 megabytes. Like it would maybe increase by 2, 3, 4 kilobytes. So
okay, awesome.
File size is not going to change at all, really, not significantly. What we are still optimizing and testing is whether on very old Android and iOS devices, if this might be flickering or too slow. But so far, our tests back to iOS 8 were quite good. Also, devices get more powerful anyways. And the effects are also just as of today, the effects are not too sophisticated. Fade, move, rotate, flip. In the future, when we have more advanced effects, there's also a performance consideration. But as for now, it works pretty smoothly on different devices. Okay. Any other questions? All right, then one more use of the effect that I want to show you. And maybe for this one, no, I show it here. So we'll have a heading here. Again, let's start from scratch. I'm going to delete the effect. make sure the heading is selected, add an effect, and this time we're gonna not move. Instead, we're gonna flip, this time vertically for 360 degrees. And that was more just personal preference during my tests. This kind of effect, yeah, just gives it a bit of a punch when the page is loaded. So what I want to do now is, assuming this is my cover page, it will load. I'm going to give this one a, let's say, 0.6 seconds delay. So now there's a delay setup, meaning if I click the play button now, and let me make this a bit more clear, I'll set this to 2 seconds. So now I click the play button, and 2 seconds later, this will spin once. And again, this is when the widgets becomes visible. So if I go down and I go up again, now after 2 seconds, this animation will run. So still might not be a fully understood use case or fully clear, crystal clear one. What we found it to be useful is if you have multiple effects on the same page, and I'm going to do this here. So this will take, let's set this one to 1 second. So this will rotate once. And now I'm going to use the heading above, add an effect. This time I'm going to set it to move from bottom to top for only, let's make it 20 pixels. The distance here means how far does it move. So you can see now it moves just a little bit up. I could set this to much higher, and it will basically jump through almost the whole page. But for this one, I want to build a quite subtle effect, 20 pixels, and I also want it to fade in. So what this does, if I set it up correctly, is it should, what I'm trying to do, and I'm going to give it a little bit of spacing to the top and bottom, what I'm trying to do is to make it seem like it's jumping out of the line here. There we go. And I'm going to do exactly the same for the heading underneath. Move. I'm going to set this one now to top to bottom, because it should jump from the line down. I'm going to use 20 pixels again. And the duration, I think, was changed. Yeah, 0.6 is fine. So now this one should, with fade, also that one I need to enable, should again have this effect. And this was for now where I found a good use for the delay. So if I now go down and up again, we can see everything's happening at the same time. But when you have multiple effects for different widgets, that's where I kind of found it useful. I'm going to give this a delay of 0.6 seconds. And the one at the bottom as well, I'm going to set this one to 0.6 seconds. So playing it, now there should be a small delay before it fades down. Save this page. And if I did it right, if I now go down and up again, there we go. So again, I hope the screen is updating fast enough, but this allows you to have the wonder basically complete its spin, and then afterwards it will, the other two effects will appear. Okay, and the last one to close this one here with the effects is what I've just set up here. All these 3 effects assigned, they will also work with our blocks. So this layer here, I could save this one as my animated heading block created. So this is the whole layer here. Now I'm going to jump to my Parallax page. And let's say here I'm going to drag in my, which is at the bottom here, animated heading. I'm going to place it in between those two. And yeah, the block was now copied. And whenever you clone, or yeah, so for clone it works as well. For saving as block, it will also store the information of the effects. So now if I go up and down, we can see that this effect is still fully available in the clone one. And I do want to, let me see, I hope I created this one in the same account. Jump in here. I'm just going to skim through this real quick because I might have forgotten in which issue I've created some. This one, I believe. Okay, no, I can't find it here, but for us, the effects panel, it's quite interesting for us to learn as well how you can use it. So we're looking for inspiration for us as well. So if you do get a chance to try it out, please do let us know what results you're getting. I played around with it a little bit. What I first did was more like small little widgets that we animate and rotate this way, but it also works for full elements. Let me try this real quick on the cover here. So one effect, maybe let's see how we are for time. We got a little bit more time. No, maybe first I'm gonna just open up the round for some questions, and then if there's some more time and someone wants to stay on, I will show one more interesting thing that we were able to build with the effects. So are there any questions or topics that you would like to look into a bit more closely?
I had a question about the preview. I know in the last editor you could embed the page so you could send the links to people. Can you still do that in this editor?
Okay, yeah, excellent question. So if I go back to the pages panel here, let's say I want to use this page. There's the option delete, clone, hide, but there's now also an embed option, and this is embedding and sharing. So I can use this and either embed this one. You get the iframe code. This is if I want to have this specific page embedded on my website. I can also just simply copy the link here, which I could then open in a browser to share it with any of my colleagues. This is what we would usually use for if I want to send it to review to make sure that it's signed off in terms of content and layout. Was that the question to share and use them?
Yeah. I was just making sure my team can review it before.
Yeah. This is for reviewing individual pages. In addition to that, what we have in the new editor is share via web. This will basically also deploy a URL if you choose. No, I think we'll do that always now. So when you pack an issue, after you pack it, you can open the web URL, which contains the full issue. So if I go here now, this is the full experience on the web as well. So you can also use this to embed it on your website as an iframe, for example, if you want to make a full issue available on a page. But this is also available when it's not published yet. So in an editorial workflow where you first create an issue for, let's say, August, then you're done. You won't set it to published yet, but you'll have the web URL, and you can use that, send it over to your team for review and annotations or requests for inspiration. Then you can use the web URL to share it this way as well for the full issue. Okay, any other questions?
I have more, but I don't want someone else to ask.
Okay, yeah, so I don't have any meeting after this session, so I'm also happy to stay on if we want to discuss some of your questions.
Okay.
Maybe I do want to show you one more of the effects that I found quite useful, which I can pretty much do here. So this is an image widget. Let's change this page around a little bit. I'm gonna select the whole page. The full page now also has a background color, which is convenient if you want to make sure this is applied everywhere. Let's make it blue. I can also font family, also something that's new. This will apply to all regular text on the page. And I can change the overall text color. I'm going to change this to white. The lines will make white as well. And then we'll use our effects on the image widget here. What I'm going to do now is right now the image widget is on the page. I'm going to drag in a layer first and place the image inside this layer. And it's a bit of a vanity step. What I want to do is I want to add additional padding size. So I want this to be a little bit smaller. And then as well for the image widget, by default, if you drag in a new image, the background color won't do a hell of a lot because the image is completely filling it. But if the image has a background color and you start adding paddings, this is how you could create a frame around it. There we go. And now for this image widget, let me just change the paddings here. It fits on the same page. Now this is where I found it to be an interesting effect. I select the image, add effect, and this time we could use our flip 180 horizontal together with fade after a delay. There we go. So now I'm going to go to the next page, go to the previous page, and we can see images appearing this way. Yeah, so that's another thing that I found could be useful. This would work for an image. You could even apply this to a whole slider, so the whole slider turns up this way. And if we now copy this one a couple times, so I'm going to click clone, you can now see how all of these are appearing. Can go up the same way as well, so this effect will just replay whenever they become visible. Okay, and hopefully there are many more interesting effects that we can explore. I also asked our team to spend some time in it and come up with some examples. Okay, again, if there are any questions or anything you're interested in, feel free to ask. I guess the last thing, or one important thing that we do want to let you know is that as of today, we'll give you invites to the editor. As of today, there's not a lot of content in our page templates, and there's not a lot of content in the blocks section. But we have a graphics designer and web designer working on additional content, which we will have available soon, which is more curated content. We'll have a lot of the effects as examples in there to play around with. So right now, this might still seem a little bit naked, but in probably a couple of weeks from now, we'll have a more sophisticated array of existing templates and blocks that you can reuse on a page. Okay, maybe a quick question to my team. Did I forget anything important? Okay, then I guess, yeah, lastly, is this helpful? Is this useful? I'm really curious to learn if the changes we've made connect with the pains that users of us have had in the past in the old editor. So really happy to hear any feedback about it in written afterwards, by email. Also, if you get a chance to play around with it, really, if there's anything that you would want to have different, if there are things that are or could be tweaked a little bit, we really take that feedback seriously. And I know some of our clients have already sent us some feedback, and some of it has already been implemented. Some of it is planned, scheduled for the next couple of weeks. So yeah, we totally appreciate if you do help us shape the editor, become a tool that is easy and great to work with.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's significantly better than the last one. It looks like it's going to be like way easier to make issues. So thank you.
Absolutely, absolutely. Our pleasure. And okay. Oh, that was one more important thing. Right now, this editor works well in Google Chrome. And because it is still in beta, we didn't yet optimize it for other browsers too well. So if you have a chance to get Chrome installed on your device, or already have it, then that would be the preferred way of using the editor for today. The replay, yes. We will have the whole session. This one also, I think we have the last session, and the next sessions, they will all be uploaded to YouTube. Yeah, we will let all of you know by email as soon as those are available.
I have 2 more questions.
Go for it, absolutely.
Really quickly. So with the columns, I noticed that you guys don't have So before you had like the 2 columns, and then you could have like it like a 2 ratio or an 8:4 ratio. Did you guys remove that?
So there is right now it's excellent that you asked that. Right now there really is a limitation. I just open up an example, maybe the article here. So here we have 3 columns right now. And it's a little bit tricky. Currently, you're not able to say you want the first column to be, let's say, 60% and the last one 40%. This is because we still rolled it out without the feature of being able to resize these columns. What will be there soon is a way to drag the different column width in between the columns. So maybe as an easier example, if we have one column switcher here with a left column and a right column, just try to show it real quick here. This one red, this one yellow. So in between the columns, you'll be able to drag. And now I'm going to simulate this. It's not going to be exactly because it's not really working yet. But if I drag this one, then it will increase in size and the text will still go to the left. So right now I'm just mocking it up. It's not how it really works, but soon we'll have a way for you to be in control of 2 things. How is the ratio of the columns? And the second thing, you'll also be able to set what we call a gutter that would be space in between the columns. Like right now, you can see the right column is yellow, the left column is red, and there's nothing in between. It really is edge to edge. There will also be a way to set up a gutter size. I think this one is, okay, the gutter size is already here. But for dragging and controlling the size of the columns, that will come. Chris, I think this is planned for the next sprint, right? Okay, excellent. Okay, thank you for that. And you have more questions, right?
Yes, I just have one more. So that's great. I think that's being able to adjust those percentages allow you to have a little bit more like design control. So thank you. And then my second one is, I mentioned this before, but do you guys have any plans to allow for the fonts to have the different styles? Like Open Sans has more than just bold and italic. It has like semi-bold, semi-bold, italic. Do you have any plans of like allowing all the styles to be used?
That's interesting. So I'm totally aware in most of the tools, and I use it as well in like design tools. I think it's the first time I heard it as a request. I guess so. I know that from what we can do on the page, it's totally possible. I'm just thinking. I guess it's mainly related to the weight, right? It's mainly the boldness.
Yeah, well, and also I noticed in the old editor, when you bold or italic a font, it wasn't necessarily using, like if you're using Open Sans, it would create a bold sans serif for you, but it wasn't necessarily Open Sans. And when you italicized it, it didn't look like the italicized Open Sans.
Got it. Yeah. So I think I will definitely put it on the backlog. This might also be a good one to go on our feature board. Yeah. So we'll have.
I know it's nitpicky because I'm a graphic designer, but I feel like something that like, like our brand guidelines has certain guidelines to how we use fonts.
Yeah. So we'll have a look if we bring it into the editor. It's always a bit of the balance of, how, should it be more easy or more, easier and less features, or more powerful and more features. But nevertheless, there is a way today that we can make this work, because we can set up custom fonts for you. So it's a little bit of a cheat, but if you send us the fonts that you would like to use in the editor, then we would place them in here. And it would be, I think, yeah, so for example, Open Sans, and then there would be Open Sans, what are the variations called? Medium or
heavy, semi-bold, demi.
Yeah, exactly. So we can add them in here. Then it's only visible for you or your publications. So anyone who wants custom fonts, you can always reach out to us and we can add them. So we did have clients in the past that needed to use specific type settings, and we are always able to set them up basically to be available options in here.
Awesome, thank you.
Okay. Great. Yeah, I think, again, if there are any questions, I'll stay on this call for another 10 minutes, definitely. So feel free to shoot any questions. Otherwise, to everyone who's joined us now and everyone who's watching this video to the very end, thanks for joining. We're really curious to hear any feedback or your experience with using the new editor, which you'll get an invite from us. So yeah, really appreciate the time you take to have a look at this. Yeah. Excellent question. So what we have today is not really a full, yeah, what we do have today is our changelog, where we will announce more or less the updates as they come in. But we do have a plan to create a roadmap with also timelines of when features become available. Can you add a note, Chris, that we make? Yeah. So the thing is, we do work on many different things. So we always have many of these ideas, and some of them, they just go a little bit more into the backlog. But I totally agree, especially now that we're rolling out the editor and we're heavily working on it. I make sure to bring this back to the team, that we can come up with a roadmap to show the progress that is happening, and also the one that is planned in the near future. Okay. So there might be two. I'm not sure if I got the question right. So we do support, by default, we have a catalog of open source fonts in here. But if you have custom fonts, you can send them to us, and it doesn't really matter, TTF, OTF, WOFF. We can bring them into the editor. So the font type is fine. We can bring that in. You just send us the font files via the chat, and we can set them up for you to be available here. That could have been a question. Maybe it was also about, together with a previous question from Cassandra, whether we have more than a single bold or italic style. Then there's a way to do that, but there might be two fonts in here, and then you can use them and should be able to get all the variations of the font in there as well. Okay. Excellent. Yeah, so the time is 9:14. I will be here on the call, and I'll just wait if there are more questions coming up. Yeah, officially, I guess we're done now. Again, thanks for joining, but I'll keep this one running. Just shoot any questions my way. I'll be available for a little bit.